have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people are on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that.
For 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that.
When Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
They have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby.
That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you.
I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
What a night we witnessed in Philadelphia. The showdown between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump was nothing short of electric. Harris, facing her biggest moment yet in the course of this campaign, made waves by not just staying on message, but also using Trump's own tactics against him with sharp lines about housing, tax relief, and a jab at his notorious rally attendance. It was almost as if the debate stage was a battlefield, and Trump couldn't help but step right into the traps Harris and her team laid out for him. Whether it was his bizarre claim about immigrants eating the cats or his relentless pivot back to the 2020 election, Trump found himself on the defensive, proving the very critiques Harris was making about him, that it was easy to bait him. And the crowd, it was Harris's camp dream, the Harris's camp dreams come true. While Trump had more time to speak, Harris owned the night. The biggest question now, will this debate actually shift the needle for undecided voting in key battleground states? Will we see Will we see Trump's vulnerabilities exposed in the polls? or his grip on the GOP still too tight to loosen? Tonight, we're going to break down the key takeaways of why Trump struggled and how Harris may have changed the game a little bit heading into this November. I'm so glad to be joined by Duro Haynes, the president of the Young Democrats in the state of Georgia, a key battleground state. Thank you for being here, Duro. Here, I'm also happy to have Macy Hall, someone who I've been working with, the Harris campaign in Henry County, Georgia. Thanks for being on, Macy. And of course, a friend of the Political Mike podcast, Stephen Foster, contributor of whattheyshouldsay.org, excellent journalist. Glad to have your voice represented. And a little bit later, we'll be joined by his brother, Professor Preston Foster. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of the Political Mike tonight. Now, I was on a podcast last night immediately after the debate. It was a conservative-leaning podcast. And the main thing, I was the only progressive on the panel, and they were arguing that, of course, that this was a 3-on-1 showdown. In other words, the moderators were no longer playing the role of referee, that they were active participants in this debate because of the fact-checking that they did, David Muir and Lindsey Davis. I argued that they did exactly what a moderator should do, that Dana Bash failed to do in the CNN June 27th debate, and that is making sure that both are operating on Earth 1, not Earth 2. There have been comparisons to Candy Crawley. Now, back in 2012, when the issue at the moment was Benghazi and how long it took President Obama to issue a statement condemning what had took place in the Rose Garden, Mitt Romney made a statement that was demonstrably false, and Candy Crawley, the moderator of the town hall style debate, corrected him in real time. Conservatives lost their minds and said that Candy Crawley had no right to fact check Governor Mitt Romney at the time. And there was even an assertion at the podcast I was on that Candy Crawley gave President Obama the questions beforehand. What are your responses to the criticism that conservatives have had for the ABC moderators, that they crossed the line and that they should not have fact-checked Trump in real time?
Look, this new MAGA party doesn't operate in reality. And when you start confronting them with the truth, it becomes difficult for them to spin the lies that their base requires for them to get out the vote. They operate on fear, division, and chaos, point blank, period. And as soon as you start telling people that no, immigrants in Ohio are not eating cats and dogs, it becomes very difficult to substantiate the rest of their ridiculous claims and the entirety of their basis of this cult of personality that we've been dealing with for the last 10 years.
Yeah, facts always put Trump at a disadvantage, and that's the problem. That's so anybody who will sort of enforce factual information, is seen as part of the enemy. So it's laughable. I mean, it's really laughable, but that's where we are, and really that is why conceptually I have always been against, or have long been against, debating Trump as a rule. I mean, he's untethered from the truth. Everybody knows it, and he has brought the whole political debate genre into a different space where it's almost expected that you're not going to tell the truth. And so when any moderator sort of fact checks him in real time, it's seen as putting their thumbs on the scale, because now you're forcing me to tell the truth, or you're questioning my veracity, and and I don't have any. So it's like, it's bad. And I just hope that the offer to debate again was just a political ploy. I really don't see any purpose in being served in her debating him ever again.
I think we are well overdue for some fact checking when it comes to our former president. And as we watched last night, when we see those facts coming out, when we see those numbers coming out, when we see all of the data that lines up with everything that we know, he gets redder and redder in the face. And so it shows that what he has been working on is this fear mongering. And he has been working out of this place of, without me, America will be lost. But I think it's about time that the American people finally get to hear, one, someone who's so confident and so competent and knows the facts and knows what she's talking about and knows what the American people need. But at the same time, to finally be able to outline the lies that we've been hearing from not only a Trump presidency. We all know that he thinks he had the best of everything. However, what do the numbers say? And so it's good that the American people finally got to see that from an outside source.
And as to the assertion that Kenny Crawley gave Obama the questions beforehand, I went back and I just did my due diligence. That is demonstrably false. There is no evidence to support that. Not only that, but Obama wouldn't need anyone to give him the facts in advance, unlike Trump, who likes to operate on R2. I thought it was, first of all, going into the debate last night, there was a lot of criticism from the right that Harris has not answered as it pertains to the substance of her policy proposals, that she's running a vibes campaign, that there's more hype than substance behind her candidacy. They complained that she wasn't sitting for an interview, and then she and her vice presidential running mate, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, sat down for that interview, in which she stayed completely disciplined and on message throughout the duration of that interview. So much so that when the moderator, CNN's Dana Bash, tried to get her to respond to a ridiculous claim by Trump pertaining to her race, she said, "I'm not going to entertain that. Next question." I thought that was an extraordinary display of discipline, and that it's needed in this era where silliness and foolishness has become so commonplace. The criticism I have for those on the right who are arguing that the role of the moderator is simply to pose a question and move on to the next segment and pack as many segments within the particular hour or hour and a half given. My opposition to that is when we continue to legitimize or provide space for disinformation, for conspiracy theories, because that's what that was. Donald Trump went to the darkest corners, the weirdest places of the internet, bought the conspiracy about illegal aliens eating dogs and cats, and brought it to a presidential debate forum for the American people. He has dumbed down our national conversation as it pertains to politics. And the more we pretend as if we should just give that a pass for the sake of neutrality, the more we're complicit, the more we're complacent with that kind of nonsense. And so we can't expect to get better candidates for office if we don't, if we actually, in fact, give power to those kinds of lies and that kind of misinformation. And so, this debate, they're going to complain about the moderators, but you know what? Every time you're complaining about the referee, you're not winning. That's what I've learned. Anytime you're complaining about the referee, it shows, and it proves that you're not winning. And that's what's going on. But this debate, of course, I knew that this debate was not going to change anything in terms of polling or where people, we've seen nearly 10 years of the Donald Trump show since he came down that escalator in June of 2015. If you're not really decided on where you stand on Donald Trump now, I don't know what to tell you. After all we've seen between, an insurrection and legitimizing white Nazi nationalists saying Jews will not replace us, saying that there are fine people on that side of the aisle. What more do you need to see from this man before you make up your mind that this is someone who is anti-democratic? Not only that, noteworthy. Take a note of who he quoted in the debate as to why people should support him. Viktor Orban. He said, well, Viktor Orban likes me and respects me. When Kamala Harris said, your national security advisor doesn't think that you should get a second term. Your own vice president doesn't endorse you. You have Mark Esper, who was in his cabinet, who's not endorsing him. You have Dick Cheney, waterboarding Guantanamo Bay Dick Cheney and his daughter, Liz Cheney, endorsing the Democratic nominee for president. And so she looked at him dead in the eye, even though he refused to look at her. And she said, you're a laughing stock on the world stage, which got under his skin. And that, people think that you're incompetent. They don't think that you are capable of serving as commander in chief. I thought she made an effective case, and the contrasts could not be clearer.
Yeah, when he pointed out that such respected and objective journalists as Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham had debunked the Charlottesville story. I mean, that was. I thought at first he was joking. I thought he was trying to get a laugh. But it turns out he was serious. I mean, Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham debunked the Charlottesville story, so therefore, it's debunked. So I mean, it was laughable. It was as to undecided voters, I don't believe there are any undecided voters. Undecided voters are closet Trump voters. That's all there is to it. So I mean, we need to come to grips with that. I think the journalistic community needs to come to grips with that. I mean, if you're undecided, to your point, Mike, if you're undecided after almost a decade of wall-to-wall Trump, if you don't know who Trump is by now, the old Teddy Pendergrass, you'll never know. So it's like, it's obvious who Trump is, and everybody knows it, and anybody who's undecided just doesn't want to admit that that they're going to vote for Trump.
And I've heard people make the comparison of, well, Obama said you can keep your doctor, and that was a lie, and so if we're going to go down this road of moderators fact checking, then we have to apply it across the board. Well, look, you can keep your doctor, then there's the election was stolen, right? Which one actually unravels the system that we even have of being able to have a participatory democracy? I think there's no comparison there.
Yeah, we can just go to. I saw this wonderful tweet from Abby Phillips that was like, when when one candidate lies more than the other, the fact checking will be more on one than the other. Look, I mean, it's not just the lies. We know Donald Trump's a liar. I feel like this rolls around every time he's on mainstream television for an extended amount of time. My main takeaway, and my takeaway from some of my folks who aren't Republicans but are like apolitical, was that he sounded insane. Some of the crazy stuff that he said, and this was just off the top of my head, a quote, "I got involved with the Taliban. I saved Obamacare." I mean, you could go through a laundry list. I mean, I was at a watch party watching this, and people were like laughing, like it was like we were watching an episode of Friends in there or something. Like every time he spoke, it was baffling. And I think the American people saw like, oh, like it's that I don't know if anybody's like on Twitter as heavily as I am, but what you see on Twitter is like this meme where it's like, oh, I hate Donald Trump. And I think that's what campaigns have thought over the last few or over the last 3 cycles, is that we got to get him more exposure, not less, so that the American people are like, oh, we hate him actually.
That was an excellent point. And, just to build on that, Donald Trump, according to folks in his inner circle, he does not see Kamala Harris as his worthy opponent. He does not respect Kamala Harris. In fact, there are people in his circle who said he doesn't even think she's smart enough for the job. He respected Hillary Clinton. He does not respect Kamala Harris. And it showed. He did not prepare for this debate. When they asked his advisors, how is he preparing for this debate? What did they say? Oh, well, his version of preparing for this debate is his rallies or is talking to people across the country. He did not prepare. Now, I was speaking with Chris Matthews 2 weeks ago, and in between, not on the show, I was asking him, what should Harris do to appeal to the folks like in his family, like in Western Pennsylvania, where there's nothing but Trump signs? What does she have to do to convince them that Donald Trump is worth, abandoning for her candidacy? And he said she has to play the prosecutor. Prosecutors do their homework. Prosecutors double check everything. Prosecutors make sure that they have triple checked the cases before they bring it before the court. And that's exactly what you saw, whether it was on immigration, where she was ready for him, and she said, you wanted to play politics with national security, so you have lost credibility on criticizing this administration on immigration when you deliberately told your Republican colleagues who followed your lead to tank that bill that was written by James Langford of landlocked Oklahoma. Nobody can argue that was a liberal bill. Nobody. Every piece of all the provisions in there were conservative pipe dream pieces of legislation, and they denied it not once but twice. Whether it was on the issue of abortion, where he says, "I've been a leader on IVF." Really? She reminded the folks, and Chris Matthews said this on my show 2 weeks ago. He said, I gave him all the time in the world back in Wisconsin in 2016. He said there should be some sort of punishment for the woman for having an abortion. And when he gave him an opportunity to clarify, he doubled down on that. Now he's Mr. Champion of IVF. And the irony is that the Republicans have been criticizing Harris in recent weeks of flip-flopping her positions on issues. While she says, my values have been consistent. They've mocked her for that. What does that mean? My values have been consistent. Well, obviously there's been more consistency on her end than on their standard bearer's end.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I was, and I shouldn't have been, but I was really surprised at how good Kamala Harris was last night. I know she's a prosecutor, and I know she's been through debates before, but I had a fear that she might be over-prepared because I knew she had been, in Pittsburgh for a while, but preparing. And, but so I had a fear that she might have been over-prepared, but man, she was surgical. I mean, she was like a prosecutor, is supposed, this is what you expect from a prosecutor who has prepared a strong case. I think the burden of proof obviously was on her last night because Trump is a known entity, and the bar for him is famously low. And she had to, she's only been a candidate for less than 2 months. So she had to prove or look like a president. She had to look like she could take command and could command that stage, especially on the stage with him. And she knocked it out of the park. She really commanded that stage. And everything that I thought, we have this what they should say kind of messaging platform. Everything I thought that she should say, she got it in. She got it in at some point in that 37 minutes that she spoke. She got it all in. So it's like, it was a surgical takedown. And I just I applaud her campaign. I haven't seen any missteps on the part of her campaign since the president decided not to run. I haven't seen any. So my hat is off to Vice President.
I also think it's really important to point out the fact of every single time either Donald Trump or JD Vance decides to take a stage to make a comment or anything like that, there's another GOP member that jumps ship. And so we're watching it slowly but surely that even the GOP party they're very much not on board with what they're hearing, with what they understand. We've mentioned it earlier, but he was not prepared for that for Kamala. Let me say that. He was not prepared for the vice president. He was prepared to jibber jabber and misdirect his way through another debate, as he usually does, and point, well, I have a plan. I was very, very excited to hear when they discussed his plan to replace Obamacare, right? Yes or no, do you have a plan? You've been saying you had a plan for 9 years. Yes or no, do you have said plan? Well, it's in the works. And, again, these are not signs of a leader. These are signs of someone who is trying to find their way back through the Constitution to get them back into a White House. And like it's been said over and over, it's just more and more dangerous. You're not prepared. You don't know what the American people want. Your party doesn't support you. You know, I would say it's about that time to go ahead and step on down. But that's just me.
The minute I heard I have concepts of a plan, I said, cut that, make it an ad immediately. Immediately. Get that on the air as soon as possible. Concepts of a plan. I mean, we need to have T-shirts with that, right? To Mr. Foster's point, there were some things that I thought I was hoping to hear, as it pertains to national security. Trump had, accused the Biden and Harris administration of being weak on NATO, or that he was better for NATO, and I was waiting for Harris to say, NATO has never been stronger. Sweden and Finland have been added to NATO. In addition, she mentioned Poland, and it was a smart move to take the international and bring it home when she mentioned the amount of thousands of Polish Americans living in the state of Pennsylvania, and she appealed to them and said that if this man is elected, Poland is next on the menu for Putin. I thought that was an extraordinary way to bring the abstract close to home in that respect. Bill Clinton during the DNC, said that he did his objective research, and Democrats after World War II compared to Republicans after World War II have a lopsided job creation record. 50 million for the Democrats to 1 million. I said that's another slogan that needs to be on yard signs. 50 million to 1. When Democrats run things, whether it's the economy, whether it's even on the border, look, the Democrats are literally saying, give us the conservative bill, we're going to get it done. The Republicans decided not to do this. So national security, on NATO, Biden has stood more fiercely to Putin than Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, all of them. No matter on the climate, on immigration, on you name the issue, Democrats do a better job, and that's just based on objective facts. And I think that's why these Republicans are having such a hard time tonight, because if these facts get out in real time, they're in trouble. They'll have to adapt. They'll have no choice but to adapt to the changing demographics, and that's not something that they're intending to do at all anytime in the near future. This was an amazing exchange for many reasons. If Harris is elected, she would be the first Democrat to be elected after another Democrat subsequently in an open contest since World War II. Because even Roosevelt and Truman, Roosevelt died in April 12, 1945. Truman took over. So there's never really been a back-to-back Democratic administration like this. So what this would be is an extraordinary thing for Biden and Harris. She would solidify, of course, his legacy and build upon it as we're entering into the fourth decade, I believe, of the 21st century, the 2030s. I mean, she's the only candidate. One candidate talked about artificial intelligence and the challenges of the 21st century, and it was Kamala Harris.
Yeah, when it comes to national security, like you were mentioning earlier, there's a couple of areas where I can't conceal like the how hot under the collar I get when it comes to the political machinations of the Republican Party, and national security is one of them. When we talk about our border security, when we're talking about the humanitarian issues that we need to accomplish, when we talk about Ukraine, I mean, all you got to do is spend an afternoon reading some of the articles that we see coming out of Ukraine, of people fighting for their homeland, and the United States has to give 0.08% of its overall budget for bullets, guns, and tanks. For that to be such a contentious political issue is frustrating, because the Republicans should know better. Especially some of the more rank and file members that I see like going along with this stuff. It's not surprising. It's still disappointing though. When we talk about issues like winning the competition of the 21st century, I have never been so excited to see a president like Joe Biden and a vice president like Kamala Harris take this issue by the horns of realizing and recognizing that you don't just beat authoritarianism at the ballot box or through diplomatic means, but you got to beat them economically as well. And the ideas that Donald Trump laid out last night were a joke. Those are the ones that Kim Jong Un and the Ayatollah and Xi Jinping are wringing their hands, hoping that he can get back in the White House so that they could get a leg up on the United States. We were talking about, I mean, the vice president and the president brought manufacturing jobs back home. They brought chip jobs back home. These are the issues that we got to ram into people's heads as we're out talking to folks. We're talking about green energy jobs being opened in DeKalb and Rockdale, Georgia. That's tangible stuff that people can see. People get up every day, put their shoes on, and go to a job that was created by a bill that the president signed, that the vice president championed. And we're talking about like these major corporations are hoping that Donald Trump gets back in the White House so he can slash regulations and they can offshore plants, let jobs go, not pay their workers fair share. But we have an administration and the potential of another president who gives a damn about working people. That's what we talk about when we talk about bringing this stuff home. And I like what the vice president did, talking to the Polish people directly, because there are many different immigrant communities that, although they are American, they care about their homelands. And there are a lot of Americans that we have to make these arguments for, that if Ukraine is taken over, the cost of bread is going up. If the rest of Europe is invaded, we're seeing higher prices for everything like steel, nails, anything you can think of is going up. If China invades Taiwan today or tomorrow, cars are going up because superconductor chips are going to be so much more expensive. And that's why I'm always on the side of the vice president and this administration, because they got a serious plan.
I wrote an op-ed that was featured in Newsweek about 2 or 3 weeks ago about just comparing the economic record of the Trump administration and the Biden administration and the Obama administration. Trump has enjoyed, poll after poll shows that more Americans trust the Republican Party, trust Donald Trump on the economy more than Harris. And that is an unearned, in my view, based on the objective stats as they are, not skewed one way or another. That is an unearned, privilege that Trump has gotten. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the signature legislative achievement of that administration, has resulted in the wealthiest Americans and corporations getting the top 83% of the tax cuts, and that's only the top 1%, and that's by the year 2027. The deficit exploded. The deficit exploded under Donald Trump's watch by nearly $2 trillion. That administration ballooned the deficit more than any other presidential administration in U.S. history combined, and it leaves future generations to pick up the tab. I remember back in 2012, they had the big dramatic debt clock going on while the speakers were going on. That Republican Party would be appalled, or they should be appalled, at the amount of debt that this Republican administration brought the country in. When you look at the fact that even stock market gains under Trump pale in comparison to those under Obama, with the S&P 500 increasing by 67% during Obama's last 3 years, compared to only 45% under Trump. How in the world did this man become Mr. Economy? It's because when given the opportunity to fact check, to push back, to challenge those assertions that he's best for the economy, many people like Dana Bash decided to just allow these things to go through, hoping that maybe someone would do their due diligence and do their homework. That's naive. I think the role of journalism, I think Sam Donaldson, Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, anybody who's a respected journalist, Barbara Walters, who recently passed away, any one of them would have said it's the role of the journalist to ensure that the American people are receiving factual information. And if it means interrupting and fact-checking, then so be it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as I think about it, hearing you guys comment, there were a couple of missed opportunities that the vice president could have taken advantage of. That 50 million to one net jobs since And I believe that dates all the way back to George H.W. Bush. 50 million net jobs to one. I mean, that's nobody. I haven't seen anybody challenge that. Bill Clinton said he checked it 3 times and he couldn't believe it, but it's a fact. It's a fact because excuse me, because of the housing crisis that George W. Bush experienced, and because of the pandemic under Trump. That's the way it fell out. And of course, Bill Clinton had probably the best economic run in American history. And but the infrastructure bill is another thing that she really kind of missed on or didn't mention, because Trump always had infrastructure weak, and never got it done, the Democrats under Biden got it done, and of course Speaker Pelosi got the job done, and I think that should have been hammered. But there's so many things, it's hard to get everything, but she did an excellent job nonetheless. And so now the question is, to me, what's going to be the fallout? Is she going to get any sort of a bump? Is her lead in some of these swing states going to be kind of solidified? And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few days and weeks. And then the vice presidential debate we have coming up the first of next month. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be another show, another good show. But I do have respect for J.D. Vance's chops insofar as his ability to think on his feet, and to quickly give glib answers. He's good. He's good. So it won't be a repeat of last night.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly difficult when you're running against Donald Trump, who tells 60 lies a minute. You got to be strategic in what you choose to respond to, and then pivot back to your own agenda. And I thought she did an effective job. The things that she did respond to, I thought she nailed them. I thought she got it right on the target. And then she pivoted back and looked directly at the American people. She would look at him, address him, call him out for his stuff, and then look at the American people and say, he doesn't have a plan for you. I have a plan for you. She invited the American people to attend a Trump rally. And she said, people are bored. People are getting bored of this thing, which goes back to and I always said, you could tell what kind of, the kind of sense of an election. 2008 was a change election. 1992 was a change election. 76 was a change election. I believe 2024 is a change election. People are in the mood for something new, and the Democrats have provided the public with that, and that's why it shows in the level of enthusiasm that this candidate, Kamala Harris, the vice president, has received. And so I thought she did an effective job. Another thing with these debates, we know that debates are performative. Going back to the 1960 debate between Kennedy and Nixon, and historically those who tuned in on radio thought Nixon won the debate, while those who watched on television, a new form of medium back then, thought Kennedy won. Kennedy looked, coming from his Los Angeles trip, looked like he got a little suntan. He looked ready, poised, ready for action. Nixon, who had to cover his face with makeup, ended up sweating so much that the makeup started to run, and he looked disheveled. He did not look like he was ready to sit behind the Resolute desk at that time for many people. Fast forward to 76. The moderators were stunned that President Gerald Ford said that there's no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and the journalists, jumped in and said, do you want to clarify on that, Mr. President? And that was an effective moment of that debate. You fast forward to 1992. George H.W. Bush looks at his watch, and a time when the topic of discussion is How has the economy, at the time it was a terrible recession, the worst since Great Depression at the time, how has that affected you personally? Asked one of the citizens in the town hall style debate. And he was a little bit combative. I don't understand what your question is. I don't see how you could say that I'm not empathizing with you because I, don't have the same tax bracket as you. Bill Clinton leaps off of the three-legged stool, goes straight to the questioner and says, can you repeat the question? How has it affected me personally? I'll tell you how it's affected me personally. That was a key moment. 2000, George W. Bush looks at Al Gore comes to George W. Bush. George W. Bush gives him the little okay, and goes right back to what he was saying, putting him in check. That was something that was, body language tells a lot in these debates. And the body language of Kamala Harris was almost like she was feeling sorry for this guy. Like, what in the world is coming out of his mouth? Like she felt like this was not fair almost. She had her hand under her chin and she was like, go on. It made me feel like I was in law school and, the kid who didn't read the night before is bluffing and trying to just gaslight their way through the class, hoping that he says something that the professor resonates with. That's the kind of look that I got. And I went to Howard, so I know the look. So the same look that those professors gave, she gave Donald Trump. And it was a complete flip because Donald Trump was giving that look to Biden on June 27th. Like he was feeling sorry for him. That's completely flipped on its head.
I didn't realize that was the bison glare that we saw on stage last night. But it's definitely something that's very, very interesting to watch because what we saw was two very different tactics, right? As Donald Trump sat and tried to back up all his lies, back up all of this rhetoric, he found a way to almost insult every single group of Americans that he possibly could. And on the other side, we got a chance to see that there was we have a vice president who is so inclusive. And it's probably one of the first times that we've really seen that. Even aside from when President Obama ran, it was very this open and inclusive space, but Vice President Harris put this on a whole nother pedestal where it becomes, hey, even if you don't support me, I support you. And I support every single American who is doing this work. And so as we kind of look forward, I think it's very, very informative to kind of take a step back and remember that before Donald Trump became the president, he also pointed out the fact that Republicans were the dumbest party and that he would be able to do whatever he wanted to do and still become president. And we've been able to see him kind of taking those steps until now. And so now I'm hoping that by the visions, by the fact checking, by the feeling that you're getting by watching Vice President Harris and even Governor Walz take the stage, that you're seeing that Republicans are seeing that there needs to be a shift and a change within their party. But as we go forward, as it was said last night, millions of America fired you years ago. And we don't want you at will in our country. But what we do see is that that Donald Trump is very much still in that space of doing things at his will, whereas Vice President Harris is very much doing things at the American people will. And so it's a very, very decisive difference between the two. It's very obvious. It's very blatant now. And I really think that those points are going to show when we see a lot of Republicans, I feel, have dropped off of that MAGA train, off of the Trump train. They saw it last night.
Yeah, Mike. Mike, you want to talk about that iconic moment where you that's who won the debate? It was when it right as they walked out, and he went and stood by his podium, and she made a point of walking across the stage to shake his hand and introduce herself. Because remember, these two people have been in the same kind of zeitgeist for at least the last 4 years, but they haven't actually ever met before. That was a moment to me where I was like, oh yeah, historians are going to look back on that and be like, that's when this debate was won. But aside from that, I was trying to pin down one moment in this entire thing where I was like, oh, that's one of those iconic moments. the entire feeling that I got was that it was just so cathartic. Like you finally felt finally somebody was just saying what America had been thinking for the last 10 years. You're crazy. What are you talking about? He's a liar. Looking him dead in his face, saying that, no, Mr. President, you're wrong. They just felt so good. It just felt so good. She said what we all wanted to say.
And that's an excellent point, because when you go back to 2016, the first debate between Clinton and Trump shook hands. But on the second debate, when Steve Bannon brought all of the Clinton accusers to sit in the front row of the debate, they did not shake hands. And a lot of things took place between that first and second debate. The Access Hollywood tape was released between that time period. Things got even more intense with Breitbart News and the conspiracy theories and the disgusting lies that were told about Hillary Clinton. It was intensifying during that time. And that debate was around the time that FBI director at the time, James Comey, basically released his Nothing Burger report that there's nothing indictable here, there's nothing here, but we're still condemning the sloppiness of that was such an amazing period of time between that election. They didn't shake hands. Biden and Trump didn't shake hands in 2020. I know folks will say, oh, COVID, they didn't shake hands. Harris shook hands, and I thought that was symbolic of the fact that this is a new era of politics. That I don't have the bad blood that you've had with the previous, with the predecessors, but I'm going to kick your butt anyway tonight. So it's nice to meet you. I'm Kamala Harris. That's how you pronounce my name. I'm going to take my position behind that podium, and you're going to say my name correctly at the end of this. I thought that's what it meant, and I thought this debate, although it may not have changed much in terms of who's supporting who, I thought what it was a contrast to the American people. Sometimes when the stakes are this high, contrasts have to be drawn. There could be no room for error. This is a man who has no plan. He was not cohesive. If you just read a transcript, to try not having a stroke reading a transcript of anything Donald Trump said last night. Nothing connected. Nothing was cohesive. Nothing was uniform. And if Biden had given a performance like that, they'll be rolling him out the White House tonight. So this is the double standard that people need to call out, and we need to, and journalists and the media need to stop playing this timid game of still pretending like we're back in 2004 with two legitimate candidates. This is either you want a democracy or not. In fact, they laid up the opportunity for him to accept the fact that the last election was legitimate. David Muir said and reminded him of his own words, saying that he lost the 2020 election by a hair, giving him the opportunity to say, yes, I said that, let's move on. No, he says that was sarcasm. Doubling down. So that alone presented to you. You have someone who's quoting Viktor Orban saying he supports me, right? And then you have someone who actually says, I've got the support of both parties, and I've always had one client, the people. The contrast couldn't be clearer.
Well, that's what I was hoping for, that the contrast would be so clear that nobody can say that they were deceived, that it would be clear from henceforth, what we're doing here. I mean, who you're voting for and why. The fact that an adjudicated sexual abuser, an adjudicated business fraud, and a convicted felon is still perhaps, I don't know if he's favored, but he's definitely, in the ball game versus, a prosecutor who has been a state attorney general and a vice president, a senator and vice president. The fact that it's even close, speaks to where we are. We're basically in a continuation. This is like Civil War II. This is the same. We're in the Civil War, the same issues. The same issue is basically white supremacy is at stake. And that's where we are. Nobody wants to say that. That's something journalists won't say. But that's really where we are. The only reason why Donald Trump is viable politically is because he is seen as a tribal warrior. You know, people know he's a white supremacist. You know, when that "Make America Great Again" means something, and that's what it means. So it's like, people, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody says it, but if Kamala Harris does not get elected versus a convicted felon, it will be obvious. It will be official. Racism will have been, rendered official in the United States. There's one little fact check I want to go back on Mike with. I'm not sure. You said that no Democrats have been elected back to back since
World War II.
Yeah, World War II. Now, Kennedy was followed by Johnson. Johnson, of course, he did succeed to the presidency after the assassination, but then he got elected in his own right in a landslide.
Right.
So we
Well,
can't
I mean,
forget that. What's that?
in the case that the incumbent's still alive,
Okay.
and that is just an open contest like it is today. But those are excellent points, because I really appreciated the fact that she said, this is rich coming from someone who has 34 counts. He's been convicted of 34 counts of fraud. He's been convicted and found guilty on election fraud, financial fraud. He is going to be having a sentencing after the election, and he's going to complain about the crime rate. He's contributing to the crime rate. I thought that was an excellent point. I mean, she waited for the right opportunity to really pull out all of her weapons, and I thought it took discipline to wait for the right moment. And he was, if you had the TV on mute and you don't know what anyone is saying, it was clear who was winning that debate. Trump did not look at his face. I mean, he looked like, a schoolboy who was told to stand in the corner. He was angry. His face was scowling. He refused to look to his left. To his left. He was not comfortable on that stage. And the more the debate progressed, the more the real Trump revealed himself. The person who's on the campaign talking about Hannibal Lecter. I also want to say the Democrats really need to send a bouquet to Tulsi Gabbard. I think they need to send a thank you basket to Tulsi Gabbard for all the preparation she did for Donald Trump. And they need to tell her to stay exactly where she is. I don't think she's been as useful to the Democratic Party as she is now.
Tulsi's done more for our country as a Republican than she did in her entirety in Congress. That's what I have to say. Greatest gift the Democratic Party could have ever given the Republicans over there. Look, we talking about the contrast earlier. I mean, you said if you watch it on mute, look, and we're talking about like, is this a vibes-based campaign? If it was a vibes-based campaign, and I reject that assertion, but if it was, like, she looked like a better vibe. she was smiling and having a good time. She was calm. She did not raise her voice, and she brought the facts each time. Meanwhile, he's getting red in the face, bending over, looking angry. Bizarre stuff. But if we really want to talk about the contrast, I want to talk about some of the stuff the vice president mentioned on the stage up there. A tax cut for 100 million Americans. That if you pay under $400,000 a year, or if you get under $400,000 a year in salary, you're not gonna pay a dime more in taxes. Expanding and making permanent the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. I think one of the most callous political things in recent era, and this is saying a lot, is that is when Republicans refused to expand the child tax credit because they thought it was too politically beneficial to Republicans. That pulled 1 million children out of poverty. Every time I hear the statistics, I think it's made up. Then I realize it came from independent sources, not Democrats or Republicans. $25,000 for first-time homebuyers. That is... I come from a generation in which people think, well, a lot of my friends are just resigned to the fact that they'll never own a home lest Meemaw kick the bucket and pass it down to them. $25,000 is game changing. It literally remakes the idea of owning a home. I could go into all the good stuff owning a home means, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a place to lay your head and it's a wealth generator. That's remaking an entire generation. A green energy economy that's pro union, pro worker, pro American made, fighting the climate crisis here in America first. I think the climate crisis, first and foremost, is a national security issue. But we cannot deny the fact that it is a workers' issue. That if you plan on building windmills and solar panels, you better do it in America. And the vice president had a plan for that. I'm glad she laid that out on the stage.
And for Black folks who say, well, what specifically from, she laid out a business plan and said, I'm willing to have the federal government invest capital to those who want to start small businesses. For Black communities, that should be an attractive thing. You know, you want to start a business, you want to, get your hands, cut your teeth in that field. The federal government wants to give you some assistance in that. That's attractive. And the bottom line is, we can go down policy after policy. If I were to give the debate a title last night, it would be "The Emperor Has No Clothes," because the truth of the matter is, the longer the debate lasted, the more you see that someone has done their homework, someone has a plan, and someone does not. So if this was a vibes campaign, if someone's, I heard Scott Jennings complaining on CNN. I don't know why they give this man a check, but he's complaining on CNN talking about, oh, well, I'm not seeing any specifics from the Harris campaign. What specifics have we seen from Donald Trump's candidacy? He's not running. It's not the same as 2016 Trump. He's not running on tariffs. He's not running on tax cuts. He's running on revenge. He's running on a platform of, I'm going to get back those who did me wrong. He has not articulated a concrete proposal for farmers in the Midwest. He has not articulated an economic plan for those in the Rust Belt. And Harris has. And the longer that debate took place, the longer that the minutes went on, it became abundantly clear, to the point where, Macy brought it up earlier. He said, I have concepts of a plan. Concepts of a plan versus exact numbers, percentages, on the side of Harris. There was no comparison. USA Today did some fact checking, and they said Kamala Harris, told a falsity. She was not accurate when she said that Project 2025 calls for abortion monitors to track pregnancies and miscarriages. They went on to say this significantly overstates the monitoring called for in the conservative policy playbook. Project 2025 does support anti-abortion policies and appears to want states to regularly report cumulative totals, but not specific instances that could be considered as monitoring your pregnancies. Any thoughts on that fact check from Harris? And by the way, that was the only false thing that the USA Today pointed out on the side of Harris, besides the fact that she said that the Supreme Court ruled that Trump would be immune from misconduct while president. They said it's misleading. Of course, we'll argue that's not misleading, because it's all determined. It's all determined by what would constitute it as an official action by the president, which is not even determined. Your thoughts?
Well, that Supreme Court thing wasn't misleading. I mean, that's that was I don't even know how that was even considered shaky. I mean, the Supreme Court found that the president would be immune from prosecution for any official acts that he conducted as president, anytime he acted in his official capacity. So I don't know how that's even shaky. The one thing that I heard was that when she said that Trump left the Biden administration with the largest unemployment rate since the Great Depression, she actually meant, it would have been more accurate to say since the Great Recession, since the Bush housing crisis recession. That was the only thing that I found to be inaccurate, because I think it was like it was almost just under 7% when the Biden administration took power. It had been 14 up to 14% plus during the recession. So, but other than that, the one that you were referring to again, Mike, was I forgot it. I forgot the one you were
The
referring
abortion.
to. Oh, yeah, the abortion thing. Well, I'm not sure. That's the monitoring aspect of it. I think they, it could be said that she meant monitoring abortion services. That could also, that probably would have been more accurate rather than monitoring your pregnancy, but monitoring any services or healthcare services that you got while pregnant might have been more accurate. But it doesn't pay. It pales by comparison with the whoppers that Trump was selling.
I don't know about that specific instance, but Project 2025 is written by his cronies. The pieces that I've seen, the parts that I've read, are all weird as hell. Like, I mean, just like dystopian. And we saw the former president try to push back and say, "Oh, I don't know Project 2025. I don't know the people who wrote it. I've never read it. I'm not going to do it." First off, he's a liar. So he's lied before, he'll lie again. Second off, these are it was put together by his right hand people. I saw a wonderful point that during his last administration, he implemented 80% of the Heritage Foundation's policy playbook. This is written basically hook, line, and sinker by the Heritage Foundation. I don't understand why anybody's playing footsie around the fact that he would do the same thing again. I'm not at all. The wolves I pulled over my eyes. I think elected Donald Trump is going to institute Project 2025 on day one. So if that means monitoring people, pregnant people across the country, if that means installing cronies and firing Schedule F employees, I'm going to take him at face value. I'm going to take him and his boys at face value with it.
And she kept tying him to Project 2025. Every time he tried to wiggle away from it, she just ignored him, and she kept bringing it back home that 2025 is something that he's going to implement if elected. And sometimes you don't have to respond to everything. In fact, they did a calculation of how much each candidate spoke. Trump spoke nearly double the time as Harris did. And so what does that tell me? It tells me that sometimes, the person who speaks the most, the loudest person in the room, the person who has to have the last word on everything, is not necessarily the winner of the argument or of the debate. And that surely was the case last night. She was able to get her message across in half the amount of words that he used, half the amount of time that she was afforded to speak. And my only criticism for ABC is that there were moments where, first of all, cutting the mic was an agreed to policy by both campaigns. And it just seemed as if every time Trump wanted to have a rebuttal, he was just given deference by the moderators. And there were times when I was just like, cut the mic off. There's no need to waste more time on this. He said what he said, move on to the next candidate, move on to the next segment. But instead, they kept unmuting it. And I go back to this fear from the media to appear partisan. But if you're following the truth, even if it takes you to where the Democrats are, follow it anyway. Follow it anyway, right? And maybe there'll be an incentive for the other side to become more truthful. But if you constantly lower the bar, pretend as if they're on the same footing, afford time to disinformation and garbage from the deepest corners of the internet, there'll be no incentive for that party to change and to break away from that fever. There'll be none at all. Any other last thoughts before we conclude?
Yeah, I would like to have seen them explore and question him, or if she would have mentioned it more, the fact that he has stated on more than one occasion that he wants to be a dictator on day one, or only on day one, or that is that is wide open. I mean, it's like, so what happens to a dictator on day 2 if he doesn't get everything he wants done on day 1? You know, what happens if he doesn't get everything done on day 2 that he wants done? So, you know, I mean, anybody who says they want to be a dictator, you know, that needs to be hammered, you know, because the fact of the matter is, you know, I think Trump voters understand that they are voting for autocracy. I think they understand that. I think they're fully aware of it. I don't think that there's any question about who he is and, you know, his affinity for the North Korean dictator and for the Russian dictator and for the Hungarian dictator. You know, these are just, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, he's telling you what he is and what he wants to be. He is a wannabe dictator. And I think I don't think there's any question. I think they have given up on democracy or constitutional republicanism. I think that you know, this nativism, the xenophobia has, you know, they fully embraced it, and they figured this is the guy that we need to protect you know, white supremacy. I mean, this is, you know, if we have to go authoritarian, you know, so be it. I think they have made a conscious decision. I don't think anybody has any question. I think that his first administration, the way he defied subpoenas, congressional subpoenas, and just January 6th, you know, January 6th, you know, this guy refused to leave office peaceably, basically. And so I don't think there should be any, you know, pulling of any punches about, you know, even Trump supporters. So people who are Trump supporters now are fully aware that they're voting for an authoritarian.
And isn't it amazing? And I know we were talking about, you know, just on the grand scale, but even in terms of policy, when David Muir asked Trump about his own running mate statement about how Trump would not sign a national abortion ban, they're not even on the same page. He's not on the same page with his own running mate at this stage of the election. You would think those were things that were talked about before there was an announcement of a running mate, but he's not even on the same page on that. And that should be given more attention. I don't think it's been given enough. You know, he literally said, we haven't talked about it. Me and JD have not talked about that. That's crazy. But just, you know, going back to the dictator, you know, Kamala Harris looked at him and said, they're laughing at you on the world stage. That got under his skin so badly because Donald Trump cannot stand the fact that people are laughing at him, whether it's at the Correspondents' Dinner with President Obama taking jabs at him in 2011 or now. The poetic irony, I think, of this whole election is that Donald Trump entered politics because he was jealous of a black man. That's just bottom line. He challenged his race. It was about race. He challenged him. He challenged his nationality. He said he's not American. You know, you read between the lines, but he challenged his nationality. He beat a woman in 2016, entered into politics because of a black man, beat a woman in 2016. He's about to get beat by a black woman in 2024.
And you know, it's very, very exciting in my eyes because it's very blatant, it's very obvious. You know, I'll take a step back for a second, and when we talk about this Project 2025 and all these various pieces, it's very interesting how people really want to like take that nitpick of no, they're not monitoring your pregnancy. Well, Project 2025 does outline that anyone who is going through with abortion services needs to outline the reason for said abortion, which again is a HIPAA violation. So we're going against a lot of laws that are outside of his jurisdiction. So how are we able to do that? Through this dictatorship, through that type of mindset. We all know that Donald Trump is the king of executive orders. So that is something that we can definitely expect into a second presidency. We also know that he claimed that women are having abortions at 9 months. Just to be clear, that's called giving birth. And that's the natural process. And so I really, really encourage individuals, if you are on that teeter-tottering between the two, please, please, please take the time to see what subjects were outlined. Understand what Donald Trump said and do a quick Google search, because just by doing that, you'll be able to see the variations between the lies that he's telling, the over exaggerations that he's telling, versus what is actually true and what's actually happening within this country. And my last piece will be that, I'm so grateful, especially when you see candidates of color in general. There is that stigma of, how is she going to react? Is she going to let him get under her skin? Are we going to see the angry Black woman come out? And to not see that on that stage, to see that presidential glow really, really shine through, was something that was very exciting to see within this space of presidency, or within the race to presidency. We mentioned before that this has been a very unprecedented time in so many different ways, right? We have the first Black female candidate. We have the first candidate, the first president to step down and to give those reins over. For those that didn't see, we almost saw three different stances, right? We saw Biden and Harris. We saw Harris for president. Now we see Harris-Walz. And the traction that is being made is very, very clear, and it's very, very exciting. And so I really hope for voters to take that opportunity to really reach out, to find that right information. The misinformation is heavy. We know it here in Georgia. We've seen it consistently. And Donald Trump is going to push misinformation at every second he gets. We saw many of times the mic should have been cut because he's backtracking his lies. And the more that you talk, the more that you're proving the lies that you're telling. So take that time and really get educated and prepared before you hit that ballot box, because we have two very distinct candidates and we have very distinct reasons for why they're running. And if we want to see a place, an America that we really can be proud of, that we can feel included in, that we can feel a part of, we know what the right choice is. And so with that, I will say, I, of course, am not a MAGA supporter. I'm what I like to call a Mala supporter. Let's make America laugh again, because we are now have our candidate, and it's very, very exciting.
And I like what you said about, the fact that it was, I've heard Republicans say this all the time. Democrats want to have an abortion at the 9th month of pregnancy. An abortion that takes place after the 9th month of pregnancy is called a mass shooting. and if you want to do something about that, let's talk about gun control. We just had a shooting last week in Winder, Georgia high school, right? And what's the thing that they say? Now's not the time. Now's not the time for a solution. Now's not the time for politics. When's the time? When is the time? This November is the time. This November is the time. And this administration is the only administration in the past 30 years. It took 30 years for another piece of significant gun legislation to get passed. Another thing I want to say before the show ends is that the Congressional Black Caucus the Congressional Black Caucus deserves credit, because my fear and I was there with you, Macy and Duro, at that meeting, the grand opening of that headquarters. My fear was that there would be an open contest. Never has a contest where the incumbent steps down helped the current party seek the White House again, whether it was 1952, whether it was 1968. And surely, even when the incumbent prevailed in 1980, Ted Kennedy's candidacy damaged Carter against Reagan very much. So I'm so glad that the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, not only did they stand squarely and firmly behind Biden, but when he stepped down, they stood firmly behind Kamala Harris. When there were those behind the scenes who did not want Kamala Harris to become the nominee, who wanted an open contest to get other candidates possibly to compete against her. I think the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation deserves credit, because I don't think if it was not for that block, we probably wouldn't have seen the debate we saw last night.
That is
okay. Let's try that again.
That
Okay. Okay. In the meantime, that's never happened before. That's a first. But in the meantime, I just want to let me try you one more time, Duro.
is
Okay. Okay. Well, obviously, that had to be the last word. I'm sorry, but I'm grateful for what you each brought to the table. I mean, this was a fascinating discussion. Please, I do not want this to be the last time Duro and Macy are on the platform. I want to invite you to come back whenever you're available. This was a fascinating discussion. You brought so much to the table, Mr. Foster. Thank you so much for what you brought. We didn't have Professor Foster on tonight, but it would have been even more dynamic discussion with him, and hopefully we'll be able to have him on at the same time as Duro and Macy. Thank you all for what you brought to the table. Please remember the deadlines. Go to research your respective deadlines to register to vote. We know that this election is literally the most consequential election since 1864. Never before have the stakes been this high. And if you're tired of hearing it, vote. That's the bottom line. The stakes are high. Time is running out, and we need your participation. Thank you all so much for what you brought to the table.